Everyone in the production and kind of ad agency world should shoot a few weddings. I only shot like a dozen of them, but I learned a lot from those. I think there's a lot of static out there about you should never work for free. I just don't think that's true. If you're a creative person who's trying to move beyond just being a freelancer, if you want to build up a team, build up an agency, here are the first three things that I would do. The first is... Welcome to Great Take, a video production and marketing podcast based in Austin, Texas. We are real practitioners working in the field, producing everything from TV commercials to social media content, and then running that content through every marketing channel on earth. We see what works and what flops, and we'll cover it all on this show. If you're interested in video production or leveraging video to supercharge your marketing, you have come to the right place.
How did shooting weddings at the beginning of your career sort of shape the agency life once you started to own a business?
My film school was shooting weddings. I only shot like a dozen of them, but I learned a lot from those. It really taught me how to be a director for a few different reasons. One, you learn to command a room. When you're dealing with a gaggle of bridesmaids or a gang of grooms, you have to be able to get their attention, hold their attention, and give them direction. You still got to get the shot and keep everyone smiling and happy at the same time. So there's a lot of skills there that translate into commercial directing experience. Even worse than the bridesmaids and the groom shot is the family photo. When you've got Uncle Tony and Aunt Susie and they've all had a few drinks and you've got to get everyone together and they need to make jokes along the way, but you still need to get that shot with everyone together, eyes open, smiling. That's where the real directing comes in. That's where you really build your chops on how to command a room, how to give instruction, and also how to entertain and keep a lighthearted environment even when you're trying to get work done.
Oh man, yeah, the lighthearted environment part, that's like crucial to commercial directing and for a wedding. I shot one wedding and I hated every moment of it. Commanding a room, that's a huge thing. Being able to put yourself out there. I listened to an interview with Ryan Coogler, who directed like Sinners and Creed, and he talks about directing as like basically being naked in front of a group of people. However big your crew is, that's how many people are seeing you naked. And like, that's how vulnerable it feels a lot of times. And so during a wedding, I think there's even more pressure. There's a time pressure. There's like this is going to happen once pressure, there's no second takes.
There are a lot of moments where it's all eyes on you and you have to be authoritative and entertaining. And with a wedding, like sort of the mood of the room is sort of on your shoulders. There's always this competition between the photographer and the wedding planner on like who's got the most control. But at the end of the day, like the wedding photographer is the one that's with the bride and groom the most throughout that day. You have to do a lot of relationship building with the bride and the groom. And then you also have to be able to kind of keep all their friends happy and entertained and still get beautiful shots.
Yeah, you have to somehow develop that relationship in like 0.5 seconds while also staying out of the way, because the bride and groom have so much to do that day and there's so much swirling in their heads and in a planner's head that like you have to stay out of the way, be helpful, be on top of it, but also like be engaged and involved. And it's a really fine line to walk. I was just in a wedding this last weekend, in a wedding party, and there were a few things that one photographer did great. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was awesome direction. I'm sure we got a great shot. And there were some things that the video team maybe didn't do so well. And I was like, oh, I wish, it's not my place to step in, and not that I know their world at all. And they're dealing with a lot of other things that I'm not aware of. But there were a few things I was like, we could have done that a little differently, but still got the shot. So
I would love to be inside your head, like analyzing a wedding videographer on like the lighting, the direction, the composition. I mean,
at some point you just have to let it go and be like, that's another creative. They're doing their own thing. They have their own assignment. They have their own, processes and pressures of the day. And so you can't judge too harshly or.
The other thing that I really appreciate about shooting some weddings is that really was my first experience with customer service, with building out a shot list, with building out a shooting schedule on a 10-hour shoot day. All these things kind of translate over to commercial shooting. And so you really build up some of these professional chops. The thing that I eventually got out of weddings just because it became so templatized. It was kind of the same thing over and over again. I wanted my weekends back, and it was just a little boring.
It's always a weekend. Yeah, that's a good point too. I feel like shooting weddings is almost more similar to shooting a documentary. There is a lot of like the commercial aspect in that, your photos and videos at a wedding are more of a commodity than they are like a statement or a message to an audience, whereas in a documentary, obviously you're trying to get a point across. But in some ways, the shooting style is more similar to a documentary, like super on the fly, super last minute. Sometimes if you don't have a good support system. But like I said, I shot one wedding and I hated it. It went phenomenal. It was great. The day went amazing. Planner was great. The bride and groom were great. The wedding party was awesome. It was like so much pressure. It's so much to work through and think about and keep in your head at the same time. And I was pretty inexperienced at the time. And so it was a good learning experience, like you said earlier, but man, it's not for the faint of heart.
I'm so grateful for that experience of shooting weddings. I'm also so grateful that I got out of the wedding business before getting too stuck in it. And it's honestly sort of like a pet project of mine of like wanting to help other people get out of the wedding industry and move into like more creative roles, more commercial roles where they can really make, because you make good money in weddings. A lot of our like first big pieces of equipment were bought with wedding money. But if you stay in it for too long and your brand just becomes associated with weddings, it's really hard to break out of that and move into more creative or even more commercial type work.
Yeah, it's such a specific niche. I think because of the points you mentioned earlier, it takes a specific kind of person to do that. So you will get pigeonholed if you're really good at it, if you're not careful. I think that goes for a lot of stuff, but especially shooting weddings. If you have the tact for it and the skills to manage it, I mean, you're set for life if you continue in it. Andrew, why did you get out of music photography?
I did music photography and music videos for a long time, and I'm so grateful for that work because I learned so much. It's like this carte blanche experimental arena where you can kind of do anything. I mean, anything goes in a music video, and that's why it's so much fun for young filmmakers to do music videos. And you should do a bunch of music videos, but it's a really tough way to make any money. You can make some money if you make some like record label connections, but for the most part, I think music videos and music photography just served, for me, they served a great purpose as just a training ground. It's where I kind of built up a reputation as a photographer. And on the film side, it's where I was able to just play around and have fun with very little risk involved.
It's definitely not the 80s anymore. MTV is not as big as it once was. And I was just talking to my wife about that the other day. Like, maybe in the 80s or even the mid 90s, Michael Jackson could spend $3 million on a music video, the Scream music video. And nowadays, like, I don't think you could get, even Kendrick Lamar is probably getting, I don't know this for sure, but probably like $500,000, maybe. Like, the budgets aren't there. And the music videos I've worked on for even major artists are the most like rinky dink thrown together, setup. And it's tough. It's tough nowadays. Yeah.
I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for music photography. And the reason for that was I was a musician. I was in a band. I was shooting shows every single night, either the people that we were opening for or people that were opening for us. And so it was a great way to sort of build a community, build a portfolio, build a reputation as a photographer. And shooting for bands did have a benefit that wasn't financial, but everyone kind of poo-poos on exposure. But the truth is, bands are building a following themselves. They're trying to market themselves. And so if you do free work or cheap work for someone who just, sends it in a text message to their cousins, yeah, there's no reason to do that for free or for cheap. But if you're doing it for someone who's actively trying to market their brand or their band and putting out to a public, maybe they have a big following, there really is like an exposure motivation there. And I can say that I did benefit from that because people that followed those bands also owned businesses. And it was a short amount of time before I got to be known as a music photographer that then some of their followers, some of those bands' followers started reaching out about portrait shoots or, at that time, either family photos or wedding photos, and then eventually commercial work as well.
I think that's huge. I have 3 friends one of which was a previous like tour photographer for a pop punk band. And I think that kind of helped her in the beginning move into commercial photography. And I have 2 friends who are currently touring photographers with like major bands, and it has done a lot for their career just from the outside looking in. One is directing like really high budget music videos for, other major artists right now. And the other is like all over the world, travel, a new city every night kind of thing, which, that's its own struggle, I'm sure. But I think that that's huge. I mean, if you get in the game early enough and you stick with it long enough, I think maybe it could be lucrative if that's where you want to stay. But yeah, it can definitely open doors if you if you knock on the right ones. Dang, what a good line. Wow.
And now there's a Bennett Creative Band.
Yeah, we're called the video department.
That's great.
Yeah.
If you're a creative person who's trying to move beyond just being a freelancer, if you want to build up a team, build up an agency, here are the first 3 things that I would do. The first is hire an intern. Find someone who's still in school, pay them $15 an hour, $20 an hour, whatever, just so that you can get experience managing people, managing other creatives. It doesn't cost you much. They get some experience out of it. It doesn't have to be for many hours a week, but it gives you the experience to start building out a team and knowing how to manage a team. The second thing is start advertising immediately. Your friends and family will always be sort of your first realm of customers, but you run out of those customers pretty quick. And so advertising is a crucial first step in getting beyond your friends and family. And then as soon as you find a few of those customers from ads, they turn into repeat customers, they have referrals, and now you're breaking into all these different networks. The third thing that I would do is just learn how to be a creative problem solver for your clients. Your clients are coming to you because they have creative needs that they can't handle themselves. And I think early on, I had imposter syndrome of, oh, I need to ask them a bunch of questions and I need to always ask them if they like it and what would they do. And that's not what people want. People want you to come into the room with ideas, with a path forward, and then just execute on that path. And as long as you are communicating with your client and you know their needs, you know their desires, you're going to do great because you are the creative in the room. And I think a lot of young creatives need to hear that more, that you are the creative in the room and it's up to you to come up with ideas and then execute on them. That's what people want from you.
I think if you hired a plumber and they came over and were like, what do you think? I'd be like, why did I hire you? You know, why did I bring you in? I think that goes back to your last point of like, you're the expert in the room. You're the creative in the room. Be the expert, you know?
When we were doing more photography, we had this phrase at our agency of, don't show up and ask somebody, what do you want me to shoot? Show up and say, hey, here are a few ideas of what we can shoot. What do you guys think? Always lead with ideas and help lead the client to those ideas.
Yeah, and hopefully you've vetted the client and they've provided some context for those ideas and stuff. But yeah, especially coming to the table with at least a starting point. If the plan changes, so be it, be flexible, but like you have to start somewhere and that's on you, you know, as the service provider.
And that plays out in our pitch meetings today. I mean, if we're pitching, you know, a $50,000 project or a $100,000 project, we're bringing ideas to the table and we're essentially giving clients options. Do you want option A, B, or C? And if you present pretty much anyone with 3 different options, they're going to be pretty satisfied with one of those. I get a lot of questions about like, how do you price your work? How do you not undervalue yourself? And I think the way to approach this is to just take yourself out of it. You put a price out there and you see who buys it. And if you keep getting better at your craft and you keep attracting more customers, then you incrementally raise it. And then when you inevitably hit a ceiling of now people won't pay that price or your work is really slow, you incrementally lower it. And I just think a lot of creatives need to study economics more. They would have less heartburn about like how they value themselves or how people value themselves or, oh, I'm not getting paid what I'm worth. If you just take the personal aspect out of it and just like look at the market.
I wish I had gone to business school sometimes instead of film school. Because I think that that's true. Like the personal element is so sensitive and the self is so sensitive. And then when you get into the marketplace, like it's not really about you. You know, it's not always merit based either. Like it's just, it is what it is. Your service is worth what someone will pay for it.
And that takes place at every level of the industry. You know, whether you're a freelancer charging a day rate or you're an agency like pitching a campaign, pitching a big project. It's like there's simply a number that the client can't pay. And so, you know, I mean, transparently, we're always trying to deliver the maximum amount of results, the maximum amount of content, the best commercial we can possibly make within that budget. But we always have budget restraints. And we always have to keep the lights on. So it's, so like, there's always that struggle of like, yes, I want a great project in our portfolio. Yes, I want to make this client really happy, but like, I also have to stay within the amount that they're willing to pay for this project and be able to like hit payroll and, you know, pay our rent at the end of the day.
That's the struggle. And I think there's like maybe a little misconception, especially with creatives early on in their career, that a misconception on the client side that, you know, this is for their benefit as well. Like this person is I'm doing them a favor by hiring them. That's sometimes the attitude I got like early on. And that's hard to break out of because like you said, you do have to keep the lights on. You have to keep, food on the table. If you're just starting out, like you do have to consider some sort of profit margin to keep yourself going. And that's the tough part to figure out, I think, because as creatives, like that is primary in the beginning, especially. And so when you're like, oh, they give us, $500, we're going to spend it all on the project. Well, it's like, well, now, you know, your labor is essentially free if all that money goes back into the project. And then, how do you sustain yourself on work like that?
I think there's a lot of static out there about you should never work for free. And I just don't think that's true.
Yeah, hard agree.
Yeah, like if you're just starting out, your value is determined by the market, not like your value as a human being, but just like your market value. It is determined by the market. And if you haven't proved that value through either a portfolio or building a network or attracting clients, then the value is zero. Like the only real minimum wage is zero. And it's either you get the job or you don't. And so for a lot of creatives, they should work for free for a little bit until they build up a portfolio and are able to kind of prove to that prospective client that they can do the work and they can justify the amount that they're asking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think free work early on, like you're saying, is really crucial, even like important, just so that you know what something takes. Or, I mean, sometimes working for free can put you in a position that is advantageous from a learning perspective too. Like I got on so many jobs early on that like maybe there were working professionals on these jobs that were doing it as a favor or for like a discounted rate, but I came on for free as a favor to the main person. And I learned so much from those working professionals that I was like in the same room with. You have to be choosy about for whom you work for free because, you can get burned pretty easily. That way you can get taken advantage of. But I think setting personal boundaries and realizing it's all about the learning opportunity.
And I think a good rule of thumb for doing the free work is just having a quota for that. Like I'll do X amount of jobs for free this year. And once I hit that quota, then, I'm not going to do those anymore.
Yeah. Or go back to the 3 Ps, people, payment, or portfolio. Like if it serves one of those 3 things, I think a job is worth doing if you have time for it. If it doesn't, put a strain on you or interpersonal relationships or things like that. Like if you're working with, good people that you want to work with, like that might be worth it to establish, more of your network. If you're working, on a project that would be great for a portfolio, there's a huge value there. Or if you make a great payment, that's another way to do it. So
early on when you join the workforce, whether it's, waiting tables or bagging groceries or whatever, you have this concept of minimum wage because that's a real thing, in our economy. And of course, there's a debate on what the minimum wage should be. But what they don't tell you is that when you become a freelancer or you become an entrepreneur, the minimum wage is zero. Like you either get the job or you don't. You either give the right price for the right type of service or someone else gets the job. It's sort of like the hard-edged advice that I wish someone had told me more often before going into being a freelancer, going into the agency world, is that you wake up every day unemployed and you have to make sure that you get some work that day, get some work that week, that month, that season to stay employed because those checks they're not guaranteed.
It's an unfortunate reality, but I don't think that those free opportunities or like low paid opportunities in the beginning are something to be feared necessarily, but something that you could look at as a barrier to overcome to level up. So like,
I love that. That's great.
Yeah, there's this great DP, Luke Forsyth, that I watch sometimes, and he talks about something where you almost can be successful as a creative in whatever field you're in by lasting the longest. So the first few years you have a lot of competition. There's a lot of people with your same skill set, at your same skill level, charging the same prices and everything. You have so much competition, but the longer you last, the longer you can stay in the game and overcome those early challenges of free work and cheap work and stuff like that. The greater your chances of success actually go up like over time. And I've lived that myself. You've lived that. Like it's a real thing.